What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. So in this video, I want to talk about darker skinned black women and staying on code. And this conversation came about because of the whole, Lonnie Love, Shan Boodram situation that happened recently, which I still don't think was that big of a deal. I really think that it was just blown way out of proportion and just overhyped and overreacted to. But nevertheless, that has led us to this conversation, which is darker skinned black women and staying on code, right? And I just really feel compelled to give my point of view and sound off on the situation, right? So here we go. First things first. Will the dark skinned black female collective ever stay on code? Get on code, maintain a code, keep a code, create a code, anything. But seriously, will the black female collective ever stay on code? Spoiler alert. No. Nah. At least no time soon, unfortunately. I hate to be the one to have to break it to you. I hate to be the one to have to deliver this bad news to you. I really do. But if I don't, then who else will? If you really care about people, then you gotta keep it all the way 100 with them, even when it's difficult to do, even when it's not convenient to do. Unfortunately, you gotta do it. But I know some of you are probably asking, well, why not? Why do you think that is? Here's the thing. Let me break it down for you. People create codes to protect things, right? Like a code on a door, for instance. This door has a code on it for a reason, because they don't want any and every person having access to it. They want to protect what is behind the door. Thus, it is a code on the door. And you have to be a part of a special group in order to know the code and to have access to what is behind the door, right? People protect things that are of value to them, right? Unfortunately, the self-esteem of the dark-skinned black female collective is just so low that I don't see them viewing themselves as being worthy of protection. That is a sad, bitter, ugly truth. I don't think it applies to every single dark-skinned black female. I don't. But I feel like as far as the collective, I feel like it's just so many of them that majority rules, unfortunately, right? And I think that may be a big part of what's at play here, where it's just like, why stay on code when you don't really feel like there's anything of value to protect, right? And sadly, like, low self-esteem is rampant throughout the black community. It just ain't the dark-skinned black women. It's all over the black community. It's across the board. It's not just dark-skinned black women, right? But I feel like the low self-esteem probably affects dark-skinned black women the most in this situation. And just in general. But when you saw brown-skinned and dark-skinned black women going in on Lonnie Love on behalf of Shan Boodram and saying colorist comments, that was them projecting their own self-esteem, self-worth, and self-hate issues onto Lonnie, because she's an easy target to do that with, right? Because, unfortunately, it's just the things that we put value on, Lonnie doesn't tend to fall into those categories, right? And, this is reminiscent of how some darker skinned black men do with some darker skinned black women when they project their own issues of self-hate, inferiority, what have you, onto darker skinned black women under the guise of a preference. And it is defended by dark skinned black men, example of them staying on code, and even some black women of all shades. All right. So, and as well, just something to think about too. Do you see light-skinned mixed men projecting onto light-skinned biracial women? Do you see the light-skinned male equivalent of a Kodak Black? I don't want no bitch as beige as me. Do you see the light-skinned mixed male equivalent of Glock 9? I don't want no light-skinned baby. I don't want no light-skinned baby. Don't want no light-skinned bitch. All right. Or say the light-skinned equivalent of Gilbert Arenas, right? Where it's like, really light-skinned women don't look good. You don't really see that. All right. And again, I just put that example out there to sort of illustrate how projection sort of plays out. Like, I think you can get to what I'm trying to say here. You don't see them projecting negativity onto their female counterpart because perhaps they just don't have any negativity to project. Right? But, on to the next. So, next question is, why protect something that you don't see as valuable? Right? Why would you do that? There's no reason to protect something that you deem as not being valuable or being worthy of protection. That's a little disturbing. And I think that's a conversation that, darker skinned women need to have amongst themselves with other darker skinned women. And also, another thing, some brown skinned women try to separate and disassociate themselves from dark skinned black women. That's a thing too, where some brown skinned women will sort of jump in, and participate in colorism against dark skinned black women because they feel like they are sort of like, some black men done threw them a couple of crumbs and they done ate it up like it's Thanksgiving dinner, and they think they are the special little snowflake and, the special one, the token and whatnot, until, the colorism beast turns its head at them. And then that's when they wake up, right? It's typical. It's not surprising. Right. So again, that's not, behavior like that is not conducive to staying on code when you don't even want to be associated with the people whom you have a code. Right? Another major issue at play here that I don't think is being addressed and being talked about, very much being overlooked and ignored, is many darker skinned black women are specifically, but I'll say especially dark skinned black male identified or darker skinned black male identified, right? The crazy thing about this is, darker skinned black women do stay on code, actually. They do. Believe it or not, they actually do. But they stay on, you know, dark skin or darker skin black men's code, at least the ones who are black male identified, right? They will defend the R. Kellys, right? They will defend the Charlemagnes, the Kanye West, hell, even the Chris Browns they will defend, right? They will defend the Shan Boudrums, the Zoe Saldanas, the Laura Govans. They will defend all these people at their own expense, right? Because they're just so lost in the sauce from being so black male identified, right? And, these same black male identified women will push back strongly against hypergamy, against interracial dating, against putting their image first and their issues first. And it's one thing to say, that's just not for me, right? It's just not my thing. I don't really agree with that. It's just not for me. It's one thing to just have that attitude, but it's another thing to go, full force fighting tooth and nail against it. When it's like, well, these things are more so in your favor versus not in your favor, right? But again, they're so black male identified that they're coming at the situation from a black male point of view. So as a black male, these things would not be in black male's best interest for black women, right? Because it would cause a disruption of the status quo. It's all about maintaining the status quo. And also another thing, with these black male identified women, right? They will join in attacking and othering light-skinned mixed biracial men like, Drake, Chris Brown, while oddly and ironically simultaneously caping for their female counterparts, like dark-skinned men do. Woo! Y'all ain't ready for this conversation. Y'all ain't ready for it. Just stop the video right here. You ain't ready for it. All right? It's okay. It's all right. Y'all want me to go on? All right. I'll go on. For example, let's jump back to Chris Brown for instance. Chris Brown, he low-key kind of gets a pass when it comes to this situation. Because, Chris Brown, he got, dark-skinned nigga tendencies, So he can kind of get a pass with some situations and some things, right? Like, y'all saw what he did to Rihanna, didn't you? Like I said, dark-skinned nigga tendencies. Like, Chris Brown was on some, wild-ass gorilla pimp, gorilla breed shit, goddammit. But hopefully he has grown and learned from that situation. I hope so, right? And as well, Chris Brown got protection from black women when he did that. Because really, when I remember that situation playing out, it seemed like it was more concerned about, at least in the black community, it was more concerned about Chris Brown's well-being versus Rihanna's well-being. From black men and black women too. Like a side eye with that. Shit. And I saw black women defending Chris Brown during the whole nice hair incident, which something is that I feel that was low-key sort of blown out of proportion as well and overhyped and overreacted to by some folks. It's just like, okay, Chris Brown has a preference just like everyone else. Okay. Shit. And I made a video. I made actually 2 videos about that situation. You know, and just recently, I saw black women saying that they wish they could have had Chris Brown's baby, because Chris Brown just recently had a son. He has his second child now. You know, and like, wow. And based on the photos of the women that were, it's on YouTube, and people have like profile photos, avatar photos, whatever. They were like black women, brown skin and dark skin black women. It's like, I think on some level, I think you might be addicted to the abuse a little bit, or really just accustomed to the abuse. I don't know. That's something that needs to be talked about too. Um, and also, it kind of it leads to the question, like, well, what incentive do black men have to change if black men like Chris Brown are being fawned over, or like treated as if they're just the best thing ever? No shade to Chris Brown, but I'm just saying. you know. But for me, I really view, at this point, I'm just thinking that women like this are really just like low key black men in black women's bodies. you know? Yeah. But, I'm pretty sure there's, a couple of, brown skin, dark skin sisters watching this, and then, wondering and asking, like, well, Beige Daddy, what can the dark and lovely sisters do, Beige Daddy? Well, how can the sisters navigate through and around this bullshit, right? The dark and lovely sisters, how can they get through and deal with all this, right? Well, this is a tough one for Beige Daddy, right? But your Beige Daddy has a few tips for you. All right. First and foremost, make sure that you stay on code, right? Dark skin black female code, all right? Also, work on improving yourself, your self-esteem, and addressing your self-worth and our self-hate issues. If it don't apply, let it fly. But be honest with yourself. If you are, having some sort of a, maybe self-esteem or confidence issue, maybe that's something that you should try to address. I really hope you're not waiting on this community to address those issues, because if you are, you're going to be waiting for a long time, sister. I'll tell you that. So you're going to have to take that into your own hands, right? And, I can't go into, like, if I were to go into those details about that, this video would be like super long, right? But there's videos out there about that as well, though. Coming from, brown skin and dark skin black women who probably were in the same situation that you were in. So even better, right? Next, and this is like super extremely important here. You have to break out, you have to break out of the black male identified mindset. Your value and self-worth are not strictly and exclusively tied to being associated with black men or darker skinned black men, or receiving a pat on the head and a Scooby snack for being a mammy, a mule, a pick-me, are going hard for their best interest under the guise of being pro-black, right? And another thing, you may have to, in some situations that become too extreme for you to handle, you may have to venture beyond Blackistan. You may have to experience life outside of the Black Lagoon, if you will, right? Beyond the Black Lagoon, right? The Black Bubble, right? You may have to low-key sort of incorporate some multiculturalism into your lifestyle. Because, there's some, darker skinned black women who have had, much success with, being outside of the community, or at least being somewhat distant from the community. You may not have to completely, like, sever your ties with the black community. I don't suggest anything like that, but you may have to just expand your options or horizons, And I think you can still, if you aren't into like swirling or anything like that and dating interracially, I think you can still do that, engage in multiculturalism without having to date, you know, interracially. I think that is possible. You can just live in like multicultural settings, where there's like just a whole mixture of different groups of people, not just one group of people. So, because of that, it won't be just like a strong cultural influence this way or that way. It'll just be like a lot of different things happening at once, and you just be on some multicultural shit. And there's pros and cons to multiculturalism, just like there are pros and cons to anything else. Okay, that is true. But that may be for you, or option for you, perhaps, right? Some other things that can be done. When you see black women engaging in black male identified behavior, thus identifying themselves as black male identified, you need to stigmatize that behavior. You have to make sure that they know that that behavior is not cool, is not on code, right? And you will do this by referring to those perpetrators as, for instance, you're going to have to use some disparaging names, unfortunately, and I don't mean to offend, but it's just going to have to be that way. So you're going to have to refer to them as like dykes, trannies. You can also say mammies, pick-me's, mules too. You have to use language that really, cuts to the core and, sort of hits, right? Because it has to be stigmatizing, right? It has to be, something that lets people know that this behavior is not acceptable. And if you engage in this behavior, then we are going to label you, right? We're going to put a negative label on you, right? And, you see this sort of play out with black men, right? When black men are quote unquote simping, defending black women, they will stigmatize that behavior because they don't agree with it. And they saying, hey, you're off code, right? So they may refer to the dude as a simp or some sort of like not to his sexuality, like he's gay, effeminate, weak, punk, fag, sissy, what have you, right? Something that stigmatizes that behavior, right? And I think in order for this code for darker skinned black women to take effect and to maintain itself, I think that may have to be put into play, put into motion. But let's say, maybe that's just not for you. Maybe you don't want to be like, the mean girl or whatever. And you don't want to call people names and offend people like that. Okay, fine. There's other options too. So in your personal day-to-day life, if you're a if a darker skinned black woman is off code, you can take her to the side and try to enlighten her. But keep it moving. Don't turn that into some sort of crusade or some sort of a project. Not with like randoms, right? Not with randoms. Like if it's your daughter, then okay, that needs to be a crusade, a project, what have you, right? Maybe if it's your sister, perhaps maybe perhaps some type of a family member, or maybe like a really close friend. But again, ultimately, I say only go on the crusade or turn it into a project if it's your daughter, because you don't want to end up wasting so much of your time trying to educate and do all this and it not even play out and work to your favor, and they just still be on the same BS and bullshit that they've been on. You know, you ain't got time for that. All right, you got your own problems. Goddamn. Another thing that can be done is publicly calling out the bias, the double standards, and the hypocrisy, you know, and taking the people who engage in it to task. That can be done. Even if it means being the bitter, angry, jealous, dark-skinned bitch. All right, even if it means that. All right. So the fuck what? They call you that bullshit even when you're minding your own business. They just assume that you are that. You can just be all alone by yourself reading a book, and then they'll just come up to you and be like, you jealous, bitter, and angry. You so jealous. Just completely minding your own business, and they just apply that to you anyway. All right? But, you know, those are just a few tips, you know. But what do you think? Do you have any suggestions to add? You have anything to add to this conversation? Do you agree with what I say? Do you disagree with what I say? Do you have some sort of, you know, reservations about it? You know, you partially agree, partially disagree. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. You know, let me know, because this is a topic that I think really deserves input from a lot of, you know, a lot of people, at least a lot of darker skinned black women, but as well, you know, perhaps other groups of people can chime in as well, you know, as long as they ain't on no bullshit, but we'll see how that goes. Right? But, you know, especially from darker skinned black women on this topic, I think this is, their opinion is most definitely needed. All right. So let me know what you think. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.